And it was actually very perfectly timed, where it was maybe 1 or 2 hours after I was officially sworn into this position as Director of National Intelligence that he arrived in Washington, D.C. and had the opportunity to welcome him back to the United States.
Yeah.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts.
You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a ceasefire in the Black Sea following talks with the US in Saudi Arabia, but it's unclear when the truce would take effect as the Kremlin stresses on certain conditions to be met, including lifting sanctions on Russia's agricultural bank and other institutions. The Trump administration is downplaying the leak of sensitive military plans to a journalist and has denied the classified information was shared in a group chat. Donald Trump defended his national security advisor, who accidentally added The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg to a signal group. Mass protests have erupted across Nepal as demonstrators took to the streets, demanding the reinstatement of Nepal Electricity Authority chief. India and China held a fresh edition of diplomatic talks in Beijing, focusing on ensuring effective border management and early resumption of cross-border cooperation. Also, exchanges including trans-border rivers and Kailash Mansarovar Yatra was discussed too. Fugitive diamond trader Mehul Choksi, one of India's most wanted in connection with the Punjab National Bank loan fraud case, is currently in Belgium. This is what the European nation has confirmed to NDTV. Well, Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a ceasefire in the Black Sea following talks with the US in Saudi Arabia. But it's unclear when this truce would take effect, as the Kremlin is stressing on certain conditions to be met, which includes lifting sanctions on Russia's agricultural bank as well as other institutions. Now, such an agreement would mark the first step towards unwinding sanctions on Russia since the Ukraine war began, because the Black Sea is one theater in which Ukrainian forces have put Russia on the defensive, perhaps making Moscow keener to seek a truce there. But some experts argue that the Russian art of the deal is selling Russian demands as Russian concessions to the Americans and then demand sanctions relief on top. My colleagues William Denslow joins us now from Kyiv with the latest. Also, Dasha has more for us from Moscow.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says it is too soon to tell whether these ceasefire proposals will ultimately work, but he says it is at least a step in the right direction. He says that there could be a maritime ceasefire, essentially in principle. He also said that during the Saudi Arabia talks between Ukrainian and US delegations, they discussed a potential halt to attacks on critical infrastructure and energy sites. Zelensky says that we will now see how that could be implemented. We've also heard from Ukraine's Defense Minister Rustem Umerov. Now, he says that what is crucial now is for technical talks to resume as soon as possible to discuss things like how these agreements could be implemented, how they could be monitored. Ukraine's president is somewhat upbeat, though, in his message to reporters. He says that they're ready to move quickly towards an unconditional ceasefire and to achieve a just and lasting peace. When it comes to that, though, what we've heard from the Kremlin, who say that for this Black Sea initiative to come back into effect, for this maritime ceasefire to become operational, they say they want to see sanctions begin to be eased. That, however, is something that is absolutely contrary to what Kyiv wants The message here in Ukraine is that they want to see their allies ratchet up the pressure on Moscow. They say that is the most effective way to dial up the sanctions in place on Moscow, to see them come to the table and for any kind of ceasefire to truly be effective. William Denslow, NDTV, Kyiv.
Moscow said Tuesday it had agreed to a Black Sea security deal if sanctions against its food and fertilizer exports are lifted. Following US-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia, the Kremlin released a statement saying the sides agreed to ensure the implementation of the Black Sea Initiative, which includes navigation safety guarantees in the Black Sea and the prevention of the use of commercial vessels for military purposes. It also agreed to allow the inspection of those vessels, but all that only after a series of conditions were met, including the lifting of restrictions and sanctions on a major agricultural bank, on food and fertilizer exporters, and on Russian vessels. The statement also says Washington will help restore Russia's access to the world market of agriculture and fertilizer exports, lower maritime insurance costs, and enhanced access to ports and payment systems for such transactions. In addition, Moscow says that Russia and the United States will work on the development of measures to hold strikes on Russian and Ukrainian energy facilities for 30 days. The statement came after many hours of discussions between Russian and American officials in Saudi Arabia. Russia's foreign ministry said on Tuesday that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is a Russian facility and transferring control of it to Ukraine or any other country is impossible. Dasha Chirneshova, NDTV, Moscow.
And live from Rochester, we have with us David K. Johnston on the broadcast. As always, David, thanks so much for making time for us. How do you interpret this conditional agreement, and what are the implications for the broader war at the moment?
Well, the Russian government is out of cash. Half of their assets are frozen around the world, yes. And of what remains, they've spent 99% of it. So getting some agreements that they can ship fertilizer and agricultural products, not fossil fuels, but those two, right, would be crucial to Vladimir Putin not having a collapse of his economy. And I don't think that the Ukrainians are giving up much here. The Russians moved their fleet away from Crimea because the Ukrainians had been so successful with water-based drones and other attacks on Russian ships.
David, but meanwhile, Ukraine has firmly rejected any partition or territorial division. Yet Russia insists on full control of some areas like Donetsk and Kherson. At this point, how likely is it that the US might mediate an agreement that includes territorial concessions despite Zelensky's opposition?
Well, I don't think that Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are going to move on this. And in the year that ended last month, Russia lost 400,000 soldiers. That's not casualties, that's dead soldiers, 400,000. And they gained territory that was 0.5% of Ukraine. That's an incredible butcher bill for a very tiny amount of real estate. Russia is in need of a break here to rebuild its military. They are down to having donkey carts deliver food and munitions to the front. And so if the Europeans step up, Ukraine will do better in the near term here in the war against Russia over its invasion.
Also, Trump mentioned the possibility of easing sanctions on Russia, as you briefly touched upon it as well, including facilitating agricultural exports. But given Ukraine's strong opposition to this, how do you see the balance between US diplomacy and Kyiv's concerns over weakening sanctions?
Well, it's very clear that Donald Trump is aligned himself with the Kremlin, which to any American is rather shocking that the U.S. would ever do this, against Ukraine. He's made statements either today or yesterday further denigrating NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and talking about seizing by force Canada and Greenland. All of those point to Donald's support for the dictator in Moscow. And the question now is, are European countries recognizing the statements of Putin about his desire to put back the old Soviet Union are they going to step up and help Ukraine? And that's not resolved yet.
Right. David, as always, thank you so much for joining us with your views. We will, of course, keep in touch with you for regular updates. In other crucial news, India and China have held diplomatic talks in Beijing in what the Ministry of External Affairs has described as positive and constructive within a constructive atmosphere. The meeting was actually part of ongoing efforts to manage border issues between our two countries. The 33rd meeting of the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination on India-China Border Affairs was held in Beijing, and it was part of efforts by our two sides to normalize bilateral relations. India has said peace and tranquility on the border is critical for smooth bilateral relations, and the early resumption of cross-border cooperation and Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, these were discussed as well. Well, switching tracks, fugitive diamond trader Mehul Choksi, one of India's most wanted in connection with the Punjab National Bank loan fraud case, is currently in Belgium. This is what the European nation has confirmed to NDTV. In a communication, the Belgian Foreign Ministry confirmed that they are aware of his presence and they've attached great importance to this case. Belgium, however, you must note, said they do not comment on individual cases. Even so, the Foreign Affairs FPS continues to closely follow the developments, and Indian authorities have contacted the Belgian counterparts to start the process of Mehul Choksi's extradition. With that, let's turn our attention now to the neighborhood where protests are erupting in Nepal over the electricity chief's removal. Take a look at those dramatic visuals coming in at the moment. We are told that the protests turned tense near the parliament building in Kathmandu. They saw clashes between the police and protesters who attempted to breach restricted areas. The removal of Kulman Ghising has actually been met with public backlash, particularly due to his widely acknowledged role in transforming Nepal's electricity sector and ending severe power cuts. The situation escalated last evening when the All Nepal National Independent Students Union burned an effigy of Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli in response to the chief's sudden removal. Mass protests have erupted across Nepal, as you can see on your screens. To the US now, where Donald Trump has said that he stands by his national security advisor, Michael Waltz, who accidentally invited the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine to a highly sensitive chat among senior administration officials on the messaging app Signal about a forthcoming US military operation. The US president called criticism against Mr. Waltz unfair and bashed Mr. Goldberg and his magazine for being bad for the country. By the way, Trump also brushed aside questions about if someone would be fired for this huge mistake. Just listen to what Trump said, followed by Tulsi Gabbard's remarks, who claims that there was no classified material that was shared in that Signal chat.
This certainly will look at this, but the main thing was nothing happened. The attack was totally successful. It was, I guess, from what I understand, took place during, and it wasn't classified information. So this was not classified. Now, if it's classified information, it's probably a little bit different. But I always say you have to learn from every experience. I think it was very unfair the way they attacked Michael. He's a good person.
There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then, if there was no classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the question. If this was Director Gabbard, if this was a rank and file intelligence officer who did this kind of careless behavior, what would you do with them?
Senator, I'll reiterate that there was no classified material that was shared in that Signal.
If there's no classified materials, share. And then if there's no classified materials, then you can't even answer the question whether you're on the chat. This is strangely familiar, and I think my colleagues will remember, when you couldn't answer the question, is Edward Snowden a traitor? Man, I have serious doubts about anyway.
Meanwhile, former National Security Advisor John Bolton said it was stunning that none of the Trump administration officials on a war planning group chat suggested they not use Signal. He spoke to NDTV World. Listen in.
do you share my level of shock and amazement in terms of how exactly something like this can actually happen? Classified information being freely shared on regular messaging apps?
Well, I can understand it. There's no explanation that can justify what happened. People say Signal is encrypted. Well, that's interesting, and maybe it is to a certain extent. But the U.S. government, over many years, has spent an incredible amount of money to develop a completely secure communication system. And senior officials who deal in the national security space should always use that. When dealing with classified information, whether it's by written communication, whether it's by telephone, whether it's over video conferencing facilities, there are ways to do this secure in every case, and to do anything else has no explanation. So not only is it stunning that this was set up to begin with, one question to ask is, in the 2 months of the Trump administration, is this the first time they've done this? One thinks probably not. And given the number of cabinet level and equivalent officials on this chat, maybe 9 or 10, every one of whom has enormous responsibilities to protect classified information, up to and including Vice President Vance.
Yes.
Not one of them during the life of this group ever said anything like, why are we doing this on Signal?
Indeed. Also about the fact, before I come to the divisions within the group in terms of their thoughts about handling this entire issue, I want to quickly ask you about the fact that Democrats have said that this is very amateur-like handling of national security issues. What do you have to say to that, given the fact that America runs the most sophisticated intel apparatus in the world?
Well, as I say, I just can't understand it. I'm not trying to portray myself as more virtuous than any of the people on that group. I'm just saying it's inconceivable to me that anybody would do this. I mean, I can't get past that point.
Yes.
Why else have all this classified capability if you don't use it?
Indeed, absolutely. Which brings me to ask you that there are divisions within the Trump administration in terms of dealing with the threat or the issue regarding the Yemen Houthis, isn't it? Vice President Vance had a completely different view. How do you view that division of thought within the administration?
Well, I think there's an important point here that I deduce from this article, and I don't know any more about the group chat than anybody else who read the article, but it sounds as though this is the kind of discussion that you have before a presidential decision is made, not after the president has already made it, which he apparently had. So I think it could indicate a breakdown of the National Security Council process. It certainly reveals that Vice President Vance doesn't think very much of Europeans. Maybe he thinks differently of Indians. I don't know. I'll have to ask him that. But it is a pretty stunning break that you see within the administration, and now, of course, the whole world sees it.
That's a very valid point you made, sir, which is that such questions, if at all, when they are asked, they're asked prior to president approval, not after that. That's a very important point you made. Now, let me ask you about the impact this could have in terms of the credibility of Team Trump.
Well, I think it's a very serious problem. Again, to come back to the participants in the chat, all of whom are high-level officials who are involved in the White House or national security. Two of them, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and John Ratcliffe, the Director of the CIA, are in charge of keeping what's classified. They are the keepers of the secrets. And yet they participated in this Signal chat, and as far as we can tell, never said anything about it. So if I'm a foreign intelligence official wondering about Gabbard or Ratcliffe, when they couldn't even see a clear breach of security when it was put right in front of their faces, what's going to happen if we share very sensitive intelligence from our point of view? I think it's a real problem for the United States because of what we see here.
Slipping into a quick break, back in a moment with much more. Do stay tuned.
ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए और ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए।
अरे ये क्या है?
ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए और ये घर की रक्षा के लिए।
न जले न पिघले, घर घर को सेफ बनाएं। Apar Anushakti Fire Protect Wire.
How often have you turned away from debates that descend into endless fights? We bring you a show where every question is answered, where every debate finds its resolution, where every story finds its conclusion, where opinions collide but facts prevail, where stories unfold with insights and trust. When the noise ends, the last word begins.
One of your primary concerns and one of your primary responsibilities is to deal with the threat of terror. And at the moment, we see a great deal of that out of Yemen. We see attacks on shipping taking place, and we see the United States being very much on the offensive. Is that a prelude for something larger, perhaps even a ground offensive going forward?
When you look at President Trump's leadership going back through his first term as president, he has been and remains very committed to combating and defeating the threat of Islamist terrorism that not only affects the United States, the American people, our own safety and security, but it is affecting so many people in different parts of the world. We can see different terrorist groups, the Houthis in Yemen being one of them, that President Trump has redesignated after President Biden took them off of the terrorist list, redesignated them appropriately as a terrorist organization, and taking action where the previous administration failed to.
Right.
The Houthis have been disrupting maritime trade and passage for a very long time, and no serious effort has been taken to stop that disruption. Our country and other countries should not be in a position to have to make a decision to reroute commerce going through that area simply because of the Houthi threat that exists. So President Trump has taken decisive action for our own safety, security, and prosperity. And I know we'll look to other affected countries, as there are many who are impacted by this, to similarly take action.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
Welcome back. US Intel Chief Tulsi Gabbard has told senators that Tehran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. However, Tulsi Gabbard added that Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is at its highest levels and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. The report said that Iran is likely continuing work on chemical and biological agents for military use, with Tehran's regime scientists showing special interest in chemicals that have a wide range of dissociation as far as sedation is concerned, and amnestic, incapacitating effects, and can also be lethal. To Turkey now, where anti-government protesters say they have planned to keep up a campaign of demonstrations that have been triggered by the jailing of Istanbul's mayor, the biggest such opposition action in a decade, despite mass arrests and clashes with police. Dramatic visuals coming in from Istanbul. Hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets to protest this arrest. Thank you so much for watching this edition of The World 24/7. As always, we'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.
ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए और ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए
अरे ये क्या है?
ये आपकी रक्षा के लिए और ये घर की रक्षा के लिए।
न जले न पिघले, घर घर को सेफ बनाएं। अपार अणुशक्ति फायर प्रोटेक्ट वायर।
How often have you turned away from debates that descend into endless fights? We bring you a show where every question is answered, where every debate finds its resolution, where every story finds its conclusion, where opinions collide but facts prevail, where stories unfold with insights and trust. When the noise ends, the last word begins.
One of your primary concerns, one of your primary responsibilities is to deal with the threat of terror. And at the moment, we see a great deal of that out of Yemen. We see attacks on shipping taking place, and we see the United States being very much on the offensive. Is that a prelude for something larger, perhaps even a ground offensive going forward?
When you look at President Trump's leadership going back through his first term as president, he has been and remains very committed to combating and defeating the threat of Islamist terrorism that not only affects the United States, the American people, our own safety and security, but it is affecting so many people in different parts of the world. We can see different terrorist groups, the Houthis in Yemen being one of them, that President Trump has redesignated after President Biden took them off of the terrorist list, redesignated them appropriately as a terrorist organization, and taking action where the previous administration failed to.
Right.
The Houthis have been disrupting maritime trade and passage for a very long time, and no serious effort has been taken to stop that disruption. Our country and other countries should not be in a position to have to make a decision to reroute commerce going through that area simply because of the Houthi threat that exists. So President Trump has taken decisive action for our own safety, security, and prosperity. And I know we'll look to other affected countries, as there are many who are impacted by this, to similarly take action.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
By all of these auditors.
Is seeking more information on the trades and the all the transaction which has happened from the exchanges, both NSE and BSE.
The Reserve Bank of India's supervisory officers, they are seeking compliance reports on their foreign currency borrowings by these banks.
The DSS is actively engaging with the Reserve Bank of India to sort of ensure the thorough examination of the matter. And
IndusInd Bank, as part of its internal review, had found that certain aspects of its derivatives portfolio was not meeting the standard that was set by the Reserve Bank of India.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts.
Hello and good morning. Welcome to Breakfast Show. I'm Radhika Ramaswamy. Parents of Kerala student who died by suicide due to harassment demand arrest of hostel warden. Supreme Court panel visit Justice Verma's residence to conduct investigations. And fugitive Mehul Choksi is in Belgium. This has been confirmed by Belgian ministry. We have a lot coming up, but first let's get to the headlines. NDTV campaign for justice for nursing student Chaitanya, as her family tells us, she was driven to suicide attempt by the hostel warden. The police say they are investigating abetment charges. Justice Verma Cash Rao, Day 2 of Allahabad High Court strike. Supreme Court panel begins probe, and sources say government to reach out to all parties. Karnataka honey trap scandal. Cooperative minister files complaint, says many ministers and judges are being honey trapped. Fugitive diamond trader Mehul Choksi, one of India's most wanted in connection with Punjab National Bank loan fraud case, is currently in Belgium. The European nation has confirmed to NDTV. Russia and Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire in Black Sea following talks with US and Saudi Arabia. It's unclear when the truce would take effect, as Kremlin stressed on certain conditions to be met, including lifting sanctions on Russia's agriculture bank and other institutions. Let's start with some breaking updates. Raids against Chhattisgarh former Chief Minister, raids against Bhupesh Baghel. CBI is conducting raids at Baghel's premises, and the raids are happening in Raipur as well as Bhilai. So that's the breaking update we are getting at this point. Former Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel's residence being raided at this point. Former Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh is being raided by the Central Bureau of Investigation. So that's the breaking update we're hearing that it is a multi-agency raid. Enforcement Directorate team is also at the residences in Raipur as well as Bhilai. So that's the breaking update we're getting. Chhattisgarh former Chief Minister being raided. Let's go straight across to Anurag. Anurag, a multi-agency raid being conducted against the former Chief Minister there. Take us through the details. What case is this in connection to?
Yes, Radhika. Former Chhattisgarh Chief Minister and Congress General Secretary Bhupesh Baghel's troubles seem far from over after losing power. The series of action by central agencies against him shows no signs of stopping. In the latest development, teams from the CBI conducted fresh raids at his residence in Bhilai and Raipur, but the details regarding the exact case behind this action remain unclear. Earlier, the Enforcement Directorate had raided 14 locations linked to Bhupesh Baghel and his son and associates, and following the raids, Baghel addressed the media, revealing that officials had found gold and silver jewelry along with 33 lakhs in cash at his residence, for which at that time he also promised to provide proper documentation. And later, the ED also summoned his son Chaitanya Baghel for questioning his office, but, Baghel denied these claims, stating that neither he nor his son had received any notice from the Enforcement Directorate. So in this latest and major development which is unfolding there in Raipur and Bhilai, where CBI, has conducted raids at his residence, the sources are saying that this is linked to the liquor and coal scam cases, but officially they have not said anything. Radhika?
All right, thank you, Anurag, for bringing us up to speed.